Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the second video of this tutorial series. So in this video we are going to start building our stateless application. Actually, we're going to use the default ASP.NET Core template. So all we need to do here is just make a little change to reflect that okay, this is our application. So we are assuming here that you have finished building your super awesome application. Okay, so your super awesome application has been completed. You finished building your views, your models, and all of your super codes right here, and your application is working perfectly. Okay, so we are going to make a little change in the program.cs. okay, because when you run your application like this without specifying a given port, right, the default ASP.NET Core port is 5000. It's going to be hosted on port 5000. So we want to be able to control that later when we are trying to deploy our application. Okay, so we want to get the port number from an environment variable. Okay, so I'm going to call this port, and this is going to come from environment.get environment variables, and the name of the environment variable is going to be port. Okay, now if nothing is passed, take default as port 80. Okay, awesome. All right, so take it as port 80. Now once we get the port, what we want to do is on the use startup method, we're going to chain another method called use URL. Okay, use URLs, and we're going to give it a template. So it's using http / I want to say everything. Okay, from here we want to add the port at the end of the domain. Okay, beautiful. So that's the template we have. Any domain given, whether localhost or anywhere you want to put it, and put it at this given port. Awesome. Okay, that's the change we're going to make to the default template. So our super app is ready, and we've made this change, and we can now test our application locally by simply running .NET run, of course. Okay, so ASP.NET CLI will build our application, and it's going to host it on port 80. Okay, so I'm going to go to my browser, my favorite browser. I'm going to just go to localhost. I can specify port 80, but even if I don't specify it, the default HTTP port is port 80, of course. All right, so we see our super awesome application. It's stateless, meaning it's not using a database, so it's working well. Okay, it's working fine. All right, now we've tested our application on our local dev environment, and it's working, and we want to now deploy it into a Docker container. Cool. The first step towards this end goal is to create what is known as a Docker file. Now a Docker file is a description of how you want the Docker engine to transform your application into what is known as a Docker image. Okay, a container image. All right, so once you write that down, the Docker engine is going to look at that file, this file here basically, and it's going to perform all the magic necessary to create a container image for you, out of which you can run several containers. Cool. So I'm going to paste the content of the Docker file here, and I'm going to walk you through it. So first of all, we'll start with a base image. Okay, and our base image is the ASP.NET Core SDK image. Okay, now we're going to use this image as our build environment. Of course, it's a .NET Core application, so we need a .NET Core SDK as the build environment. Now we're going to specify a working directory, and we're going to call that directory app. Now we're going to copy our project file into our working directory. Then we're going to run the .NET restore command, okay, and this will restore our project dependencies, assuming you have one. Then we're going to copy the content, the full content of our path here into our working directory, and then we're going to run .NET publish command, okay, and we're going to specify a configuration of release, and we're going to specify an output folder within our container that the files are going to be dumped. Okay, so after that, the next step here is we're going to same SDK, we specify our app, then we're going to expose by default port 80. Okay, but this is just for documentation purposes, right? If we change the port from my environment variable, that's the port we are going to listen to. Okay, but by default we are saying we expose port 80. Cool. Then we're going to copy the content from our build environment into the working directory, and then we are going to start our application by calling .NET with the DLL that will be exposed from the build process. Okay, so this here is the content of the Docker file required to build an ASP.NET Core application. Okay, all right, so once that is done, I want to point out something here. Notice that on this line 7 we are copying all the content of this our directory into our working directory within our container. That includes the bin and the obj folder. Okay, we don't need to copy these two. So how can we exclude it? We can exclude it using what is known as a docker ignore file. Okay, so I'll create a docker ignore file right here, and within this file I want to specify the bin, everything within the bin, and everything within the obj folder. Awesome. So right now we've ejected, we've removed the bin and the obj folder from the process of building up our container image. Okay, so awesome. I think just do a little bit of checkup here. It's customary that you might get error the first, second, or third time, but the main thing is that you look at the error prompt and find out the reason why it failed and fix it. Okay, so just cross check this. Okay, all right, I think we are fine, so let's try it out. Okay, so I'm going to run this command, just a single command that will help us build up the container image. So is the docker command is docker build. Okay, where do we want to build? So the first argument to the docker build is the path to the docker file. Now the path to the docker file is actually within this directory, so I will just use dot. Then I'll put a -t for tag, so I'm going to name my application, my image. So I'm going to give it web app stateless. Okay, here I can do a colon and put the particular version I want, but I'm just going to leave it empty. And if you leave it empty, Docker is going to give it a default tag of latest. Okay, so that's what you want, latest. So I'm going to do docker build in this directory with the tag of web stateless. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter. Once I do that, the process of building the image will start, and if you look at it, it's actually taking the steps we specified within our Docker file, and it's going to execute each of those lines one by one until our image is ready. Okay, now I want to point out that I already have these images pulled down to my local system. If you don't have it on your local system, is the Docker engine will go up to Docker Hub to first of all pull these images down before it starts building your own image. Okay, so let's give it a time to complete. Right now is restoring NuGet packages for our solution. This is the point in the application where you have to be patient. Okay, all right, so I think it's done. Right, so it has successfully created the tag web application latest. Beautiful. Okay, so right now our application, our image has been created. Okay, so if I pull up PowerShell here and do Docker images just to check all the images in my system, you can see I have a lot of them here. The one that is of interest to us is the one we just created, web app stateless, and here is a tag latest, and it was created 29 seconds ago. Okay, and the size is a whopping 710 megabytes. Beautiful. Okay, so we've created our image. It's now time for us to use it. Okay, so let's create a container out of this image. So to do that, we simply say docker run. Now we're going to do what is known as a port mapping. So we know that our app is exposed by default on port 80 within the container, but we are going to map that port 80 to port 9000 on the host machine, and we're going to map it to port 80 within the container, and we're going to specify the name of our image, which is web app stateless. Okay, perfect. So here is a command. So this command will go off and create a container out of this image, and is going to map the internal port of 80 to the external port of 90. Okay, beautiful. So it looks like our application has been deployed. So I'll open my browser here. Now if I go to port 80, localhost port 80, I won't be able to hit this application, because it's not reachable, right, on my computer. Is actually running on port 80 within the container. But if I hit localhost port 9000, okay, this port 9000 is mapped to the port 80 within the container, and once we hit this port, our request will be routed into the container, and we should be able to access our web application. How cool is that? So we have our super awesome application running here within a Docker container. So we hit privacy, come back to home, everything is rendering as it should be. Okay, so here is how you build a stateless ASP.NET Core web application and deploy it into a Docker container. So join me in the next video where I will now add a database backend to this application and see how we can deploy a stateful application, a stateful ASP.NET Core web application using Entity Framework into a Docker container. So here is the point where I'll ask that if you have not subscribed to this channel, please do so, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I'll see you in the next video.